the Honorable Prime Minister of India, Shri Narendra Modi, being warmly greeted as he has arrived here to inaugurate the Asian Ministerial Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction 2016. This conference and its outcome will impact the Asia-Pacific region and will also have a positive global impact. And that is why we see delegates here from 61 countries in the Asia-Pacific region and over 4,000 Indians from various NGOs and other organizations that are active in this field. By the hosting of this conference, India renews its commitment to the Sendai framework to pursue a resilient and sustainable future for all citizens of the world. As the chief guest arrives on the dais, we hand you over to the activities there.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in extending a very warm welcome to our Honorable Prime Minister of India, Shri Narendra Modi, to this event. May I also extend a very warm welcome to His Excellency Mr. Kurelsuk Ukna, Honorable Deputy Prime Minister of Mongolia, His Excellency Mr. Bimlendra Nidhi, Honorable Deputy Prime Minister of Nepal, our Honorable Home Minister Shri Rajnath Singh, Shri Kiran Rijiju, Honorable Minister of State, Home Government of India, Shri Hansraj Gangaram Ahir, Honorable Minister of State for Home Government of India, Mr. Robert Glasser, Special Representative of the United Nations Secretary General, Mr. Toshihiro Nikai, Secretary General, Liberal Democratic Party, member, LDP Japan, and Shri Rajiv Maharishi, Home Secretary. Ladies and gentlemen, before we commence the inaugural session, we would like to extend an extremely warm welcome to our Honorable Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi, to this occasion with a floral welcome. A very warm welcome to you, Honorable Prime Minister. Thank you so much for gracing this occasion. Ladies and gentlemen, it is customary in the Indian tradition to light the ceremonial lamp to invoke divine blessings before new and auspicious beginnings. May I please request our Honorable Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi ji, to kindly light the ceremonial lamp, and may I also request our other esteemed dignitaries on the dais to kindly join in the lighting of the ceremonial lamp. Thank you, Honorable Prime Minister and esteemed dignitaries, for the lighting of the ceremonial lamp. Ladies and gentlemen, this first Asian Ministerial Conference for Disaster Risk Reduction after the advent of the Sendai Framework hosted by the Government of India is a follow-up from the 6th Asian Ministerial Conference Outcome 2014, and as a requirement of the Sendai Framework, the intended outcome of the conference in India is to adopt an Asian regional plan for implementation of the Sendai Framework. AMCDRR 2016 will provide a unique opportunity to shape the implementation and monitoring of the Sendai Framework in Asia. AMCDRR 2016 is organized by the Government of India in collaboration with the United Nations International Strategy for Disaster Reduction. Acknowledging India's commitment towards disaster risk reduction, the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction has designated Shri Kiran Rijiju, Honorable Minister, as a disaster risk reduction champion for the Asia region. With these words, may I please request Honorable Minister of State for Home, Shri Kiran Rijiju, and request him to kindly make his welcome remarks.
Honorable Prime Minister Sri Narendra Modi ji, Honorable Deputy Prime Minister Republic of Mongolia Mr. Khulesuk, Honorable Deputy Prime Minister of Nepal Sri Bimalendra Nidhi, Honorable Home Minister Sri Rajnath Singh ji, Mr. Toshihiro Nikai, Secretary General LDP of Japan, Mr. Robert Glasser, Special Representative to United Nations Secretary General, Sri Hansraj Ahir, Minister of State for Home, Sri Rajiv Mehersi, Home Secretary, Excellencies, Governors, Chief Ministers, Ministers, representatives of United Nations, international organizations, senior officials, media, distinguished guests. On behalf of the Government of India and the people of India, I welcome all the distinguished delegates and representatives. It is indeed a great honor and privilege for Government of India to host the first Asian Ministerial Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction after adoption of the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction 2015 to 2030 by 187 countries at the World Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction in Sendai, Japan in 2015. The Asian Ministerial Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction 2016 will provide a unique opportunity to shape the implementation and monitoring of the Sendai Framework for Asia. On behalf of Government of India, I am thankful to the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction for their continuous support in organizing this conference and express my sincere gratitude for acknowledging India's efforts in disaster risk reduction and designating me as disaster risk reduction champion for Asian region. In the last few decades, Asia-Pacific region has experienced exponential increase in disasters. These have often hampered the achievement of development goals. The harshest impact is often on the most vulnerable and marginalized people. The impact of natural disasters has been growing rapidly due to global population growth, urbanization, and increased social economic activity, with a tenfold increase in losses from disasters since 1970. Sendai is a forward-looking and ambitious framework aimed at reducing the number of people damaged to critical infrastructure from disasters by 2030. Successful implementation of Sendai framework at the national and local level calls for critical attention to its guiding principles and 7 global targets. Countries will need to adopt the guiding principles while prioritizing action towards 7 global targets. This will entail creation of an enabling environment at all levels towards effective and accelerated implementation of the Sendai framework with the collaboration and cooperation of all governments and stakeholders. India is amongst the first countries to frame National Disaster Management Plan under the able guidance of Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji. Our endeavor in the National Disaster Management Plan is to take all the stakeholders along in our effort to build a resilient India. We believe that while governments have to play a central role, civil society organizations, professional bodies, scientific and technical institutions, and private sector have very important role to play in this effort. We need to move from disaster management to disaster risk management approach and to look at it as development governance issue. This conference will provide a unique opportunity to shape the efforts toward disaster preparedness and risk management for effective response and to build back better in recovery, rehabilitation and reconstruction. This conference will provide single platform for meaningful exchange of information and sharing of ideas and also coordination amongst the stakeholders to bring greater synergies in the efforts by all stakeholders based on their experiences. I urge all the stakeholders to discuss and work together for reducing the disaster risks and to make Asian region a safer place for sustainable development. I once again welcome you all to India and wish this conference all the success. Jai Hind.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, for your warm welcome remarks and also for setting the context of the conference. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to now invite Mr. Robert Glasser, Special Representative of the United Nations Secretary General, and request him to kindly address us.
Mr. Prime Minister, ministers, ambassadors, distinguished delegates, it is an honor to be here today to address you at this opening ceremony. Before making a few remarks, I would like to read to you a message from the United Nations Secretary General on the occasion of this important conference. The message begins, I am pleased to convey my warmest greetings to the Government of India on hosting the Asian Ministerial Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction in collaboration with the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. This important conference will set the direction for implementation of the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction over the next 14 years. The adoption of the Sendai Framework marked a crucial contribution to the articulation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. With the subsequent agreement on the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, Paris Agreement on Climate Change, and last month, the new Urban Agenda, the world now has the tools and guidance required to achieve sustainable development, eradicate poverty, and build peaceful societies that leave no one behind. The journey from Sendai continues here in Delhi, where the outcomes of your efforts will influence the disaster risk reduction agenda, not just in Asia, but in the world at large. Asia faces formidable challenges in managing disaster risk. Those include poverty, environmental deterioration, seismic risk, climate change, and population growth in especially vulnerable areas. Yet Asia has also achieved remarkable progress in facing these threats by systematically improving policies, investing in institutions, and enhancing national capacities. Perhaps the most important driver of disaster risk is weak disaster risk governance. Clear vision, plans, competence, guidance, and coordination are essential. Many of you are already taking steps to ensure that your national disaster management agencies are focused not just on managing disasters, but also managing the risk which can lead to those disasters. I'm confident that this conference will bring further improvements in your already considerable efforts to reduce disaster losses across the region. I wish you every success. The Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. Mr. Prime Minister, ministers, ambassadors, distinguished delegates, this is the first Asian Ministerial Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction since the UN World Conference hosted by Japan in March last year, when the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction was adopted. The Sendai Framework emphasizes the importance of moving, as we've heard, from managing disasters to managing disaster risk if we are to achieve substantial reductions in disaster losses. In this region, many countries have integrated disaster risk reduction into their overall development planning, and there's a growing understanding of the importance of a risk-sensitive approach to major infrastructure investments in both the private sector and the public sectors. In order to achieve a substantial reduction in disaster losses by 2030, there is a clear need to build on Asia's success in reducing mortality from floods and storms in particular. And as we look towards the deadline of 2020 for the delivery of substantial increases in national and local plans for reducing disaster risk, we must embrace other elements of the 2030 development agenda. There's a clear opportunity to avoid duplication of effort by ensuring that plans for climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction complement each other and make the best use of available resources. Success in building sustainable cities will help reduce disaster losses, and Asia is already home to 53% of the world's urban population. Well-managed, hazard-resistant cities offer great opportunities for economic development and access to basic services, including health and education. The Sendai Framework recognizes the importance of regional platforms such as this and its supporting mechanism, the ISDR Asia Partnership. This regional collaboration is absolutely vital for strengthening disaster risk governance, which of course is a key Sendai priority. Understanding disaster risk is also vital. We need policies and practice that take account of disaster risk in all its dimensions of vulnerability, capacity, and exposure of persons and assets. In summary, these and other priorities for action of the Sendai Framework and delivering on those priorities is what has brought us here this week at this critical meeting. On behalf of UNISDR, I want to very sincerely thank the host government of India for its hospitality and for making this important gathering possible. The expected outcomes of the conference are an Asia regional plan for implementation of the Sendai Framework. Second, a political declaration that reiterates the commitments of governments to disaster risk reduction, and also, fundamentally important, stakeholder action statements containing various initiatives to reduce disaster risk. These outcomes will reaffirm the region's leadership on disaster risk management and provide important input to the global platform for disaster risk reduction, which will be hosted by the government of Mexico in May of next year. I very much look forward to engaging with many of you in the coming days on this exciting agenda and also in the months ahead. And I want to thank you for your commitment, your attention, and wish us all a very successful conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Robert Glasser, for your kind address and also for sharing with us the UN Secretary General's pertinent message on disaster and risk management. You also gave us a very succinct overview of the UN's will and commitment in creating and sustaining safer environments. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to now invite Mr. Toshihiro Nikai, Secretary General, Liberal Democratic Party member from Japan, and may I please request him to kindly address us.
ただいまご紹介をいただきました日本国衆議院議員自由民主党幹事長の二階俊博であります。この度アジア防災閣僚会議においてご挨拶の機会を得まして大変光栄に存じます。本会議実現のためにご尽力をいただきました国連国際防災戦略事務局およびインド政府および多くの関係者の皆様に心から敬意を表したいと思います。この度のアジア防災閣僚会議は昨年3月の 第3回国連防災世界会議において採択された仙台防災枠組み2015-2030を推進するためのアジア地域における初めての会議となります。会議最終日の11月5日は、昨年12月に国連総会において142カ国もの共同提案国のご協力をいただき、全会一致で制定された初めての世界津波の日であります。インド太平洋に面する我々アジア諸国は、津波をはじめ多くの自然災害に、その脅威に常にさらされております。逆に言えば、他の地域と比べて多くのつらい経験と、それを乗り越えてきたお互いの知見が蓄積されておるのであります。ここにお集まりの各国の防災分野のリーダーの皆さんが、国際社会における議論を常にリードしてきていると私は確信をしております。我が国には今から150年以上前に、浜口御寮という一人の村のリーダーが、大地震の後には必ず津波が来るという伝統的知識によって村人を高台に誘導し、多くの命を救うとともに、村のより良い復興のために資材を投げ打って堤防を整備した稲むらの日という逸話が残されています。津波をはじめ自然災害から命を守るためには、早期警報システムや堤防等のインフラの整備をはじめ、事前の防災投資が重要であることは言うまでもありませんが、何よりも大事なことは、津波の恐ろしさやその対策について、子どもたちをはじめ一人でも多くの人々に正しく理解してもらい、一緒になって取り組むことが重要なのであります。我が国は今月末にインド太平洋アジアの諸国をはじめ、世界中から250人の子どもたちを日本にご招待し、世界津波の日高校生サミット in 黒潮を開催する予定であります。子どもたちの防災への意識が高まれば、必ずや将来の防災・減災につながることは間違いありません。こうした取り組みを世界に広げるために、私は世界中の若き津波防災大使の皆さんと協力し、世界の人々や多くの尊い命を守るための挑戦を始めたいと思います。ここに お集まりの多くの有識者の皆さんのご協力をお願いし、世界の隅々にまで防災・減災のお互いの知識を共有しながら、防災によって一人でも多くの命を助けることができるように、皆さんのご協力をこの席から心からお願いをしてご挨拶とします。ありがとうございました。Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Toshihiro Nikai, for your kind address. Japan's past experience and expertise is indeed a learning experience for other countries to follow. Ladies and gentlemen, may I now invite our Honorable Home Minister, Shri Rajnath Singh, and may I please request him to kindly make his opening remarks.
Honorable Prime Minister, Sri Narendra Modi ji, Honorable Deputy Prime Minister, Mr. Khelsuk, Republic of Mongolia, Honorable Deputy Prime Minister of Nepal, Sri Bimalendra Nidhi ji, Mr. Toshihiro Nikai, Secretary General LDP from Japan, Mr. Robert Glacier, Special Representative, UN Secretary General, my colleague Ministers of State, Sri Hansraj Ahir and Sri Kiranji Rijju, Home Secretary, Government of India, Sri Raju Maharshi, esteemed colleagues on the dais, distinguished delegates from Asia and Asia Pacific countries, representatives of United Nations organizations, civil society organizations, representatives of local bodies from India, ladies and gentlemen. On the occasion of the 7th Asian Ministerial Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to India. I am grateful to the ministers, distinguished delegates, and representatives of local self-governments who, despite their busy schedule, have accepted our invitation to participate in this event. The gathering today collectively represents commitments for a safe and secure world. I hope my ministry has made all possible efforts to make your stay comfortable here in New Delhi. I hope you all will have a pleasant stay here and that our visit will be fruitful and rewarding in terms of outcomes and learnings. Disasters, both natural and man-made, are occurring with increased frequency and intensity. The Asian region is especially vulnerable. 8 of the 10 disasters in the world occur in Asia, making 2/3 of the world's population vulnerable. We believe that disaster resilience is the collective responsibility of all segments of society, including governments, business community, non-governmental sectors, and individuals. If we all work together with a united focus and a shared sense of responsibility to improve disaster resilience, we will be far from effective than the individual efforts of any one sector. This is, therefore, a timely and important conference, a critical first step in implementing the Sendai framework in our region. Disasters seriously affect our economy, are a setback to our developmental efforts, and most of all, cause untold grief of the families who lose their near and dear ones. Moreover, a grieving family is simultaneously faced with the loss of home and livelihood. Minimizing the responsibility and then the impact of this human tragedy at its worst is, in my opinion, amongst the most critical part of the compact between the state and its citizens. It is gratifying to note that the agenda of the conference covers a wide diversity of subjects ranging from risk governance, making world heritage resilient, to business and private sector engagement in disaster risk reduction. I belong to and have been Chief Minister of a state that is threatened by both earthquakes and floods. I have witnessed firsthand the suffering that such disasters bring and am aware that our civilians, such as unregulated building, is adding to the already greater risk caused by factors such as climate change. It is therefore a matter of great satisfaction to me that our focus is shifting from disaster management to disaster risk reduction. There is now international acknowledgement that efforts to reduce disaster risk must be systematically integrated in policy, plans, and programs for sustainable development and poverty reduction. We all know, of course, that disaster risk recognizes no political boundaries. This includes risks caused by human actions. Disasters in one region can and will impact other regions. It is therefore also satisfying that today we realize that both disaster risk reduction and disaster relief need to be supported through bilateral, regional, and international cooperation, including partnership. It is with this spirit of regional and international cooperation that India has supported and is always ready to support other countries, especially its neighbors, in disaster mitigation and management efforts. We offer the best we have in terms of technology, capacity building, and relief expertise to all those in need. We are uncompromisingly committed to regional and international cooperation in this regard. In India, our ancestors gave us the concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which means that the whole planet, with all its human beings, plants, animals, birds, and the natural resources, is one family. This ancient realization of our interconnectedness is even more relevant and urgent today. I would like to urge this august gathering to embrace this significant notion and hence enhance international cooperation through sharing of technology, expertise, and necessary resources. Here I would also like to reiterate the commitment made by our Honorable Prime Minister in SAARC Summit last year of ensuring India's help and expertise to its neighboring country. Ladies and gentlemen, there is a clear need to discuss specific aspects of multilateral dialogue and cooperation, such as establishment of clear channels of communication, sharing scientific knowledge, creation of a database of disaster response capabilities, and pre-positioning of material to shorten response time. Disasters in India are being handled at all levels, at the national, the state, and the district levels. Comprehensive and holistic policies for management of all disasters supported by plans, legal framework, and the financial arrangements are essential elements of any strategy for their management. The role of the states is crucial in this as they face the immediate brunt from disasters. We are, of course, committed to doing the utmost to support their endeavor. Ladies and gentlemen, India has taken up several initiatives to substantially reduce disaster risk and losses in lives, livelihoods, and health, and in the economic, physical, social, cultural, and environmental assets of persons, business, communities, and countries. On the first day of June 2016, India and Asia's first ever National Disaster Management Plan were released by our Prime Minister, Sri Narendra Modi. The plan outlines a framework for strengthening disaster risk governance at various levels. The plan also provides a framework for disaster risk reduction through mainstreaming disaster risk reduction into developmental plans. The AMCDRR is a unique opportunity to come together and provide a sense of urgency to the implementation of Sendai framework. We have invited a number of officials from our local and state governments who will have a lot to share with and learn from you. In the run-up to AMCDRR, a number of our educational and training institutions have organized curtain raiser events to broaden the engagement on disaster issues and mobilize the capacities of all sections of society. Before concluding, we pledge our support to Asian Regional Plan for implementation of the Sendai framework, its goals and priorities. We commit ourselves to work with countries in the region to achieve the goals of Sendai framework towards a safer and resilient Asia and the world against disaster. I once again thank you all for your participation. Jai Hind.
Thank you, Honorable Home Minister Shri Rajnath Singh, for your notable address. You spoke from your experience and rightly said that disaster doesn't recognize political boundaries, and hence it is important that countries come together and collaborate in working together. And also in this regard, you reiterated India's commitment towards this common goal. Ladies and gentlemen, India is moving towards resilience with a focus on understanding risk and disaster risk reduction. Ladies and gentlemen, we now have a short film on the same. Can we have the film, please?
In the interests of the prosperity of the country, a king should be diligent in foreseeing the possibility of calamities. Try to avert them before they arise. Overcome those which happen. Remove all obstructions to economic activity and prevent loss of revenue to the state. Kautilya, 4th century BCE. Over centuries, man has learned to live in harmony with nature. This acceptance of nature's benevolence, as well as fury, manifests itself in art, mythologies, and stories of ruin and reconstruction. With population growth, urbanization, and environmental degradation, natural hazards have started becoming disasters. The Asia-Pacific region is one of the most disaster-prone in the world. It has 60% of the world's population, but 88% of the world's disaster-affected people live here. The Indian Ocean tsunami, Myanmar's cyclone Nargis, Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines, and several major earthquakes are a reminder of the region's vulnerability. India too has been affected by major disasters. The Odisha supercyclone in 1999, the Gujarat earthquake in 2001, and the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami forced a rethink in the way the country manages disasters. Drawing on the successful experience of Gujarat after the 2001 earthquake, India enacted the Disaster Management Act of 2005. The National Disaster Management Authority was set up, followed by the creation of similar bodies at the state and district levels. Specialized institutions were created for research, training and capacity building, encompassing all aspects of disaster risk management. The country has leveraged science and technology for managing disaster risk. India's investment in satellite and radar technologies, weather observation systems, use of supercomputers for climate prediction has strengthened the early warning systems across the region, especially in the Indian Ocean Rim countries. The focus shifted from disaster management to disaster risk management. The new approach involves prevention and mitigation, preparedness and early warning before disasters, swift response during disasters, and sustainable recovery after disasters. Years of efforts of leading early warning institutions have helped in improved lead time and accuracy of early warning. Ensuring last-mile connectivity is the key to success in disaster mitigation. Mock exercises are organized regularly to empower millions residing in high-risk areas. In 2006, a National Disaster Response Force was set up. Similar forces are being formed at the state and local levels. In 2011, India launched one of the largest national cyclone risk mitigation programs covering its entire coastline. Vulnerable structures, particularly schools and hospitals, have been retrofitted in disaster-prone regions. Various social sector programs of the government are geared towards mainstreaming disaster risk reduction. Housing for All, Making Disaster Resilient Houses. Smart Cities Program, Making Cities Resilient to Disasters. Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, a cornerstone of farmers' financial resilience. After disasters, rebuilding lives and livelihoods is a challenge. The owner-driven approach to reconstruction, adopted by the government of Gujarat in 2001, led to safer and better housing conditions in a short time span. These efforts laid the foundation for sustainable economic development. Gujarat's stellar industrial growth speaks for itself. India's multi-pronged efforts have begun to show tangible results. The loss of lives in recent high-intensity cyclones, Phylline and Hudud, was contained to 23 and 46, as compared to over 10,000 lives lost in 1999 in a similar cyclone. In June 2016, the Prime Minister launched the National Disaster Management Plan, which promotes a holistic approach towards disaster risk reduction.
It is a textbook, perfect example of aligning a strategy at a national level with global commitments as a show of global leadership as well as regional leadership.
In the spirit of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, or the world is one family, India stands shoulder to shoulder with other countries in reducing and managing disaster risks. India responded to the Nepal earthquake of 2015 by sending both its rescue forces and relief material with speed and purpose. India hosted the first South Asian annual disaster management exercise for SAARC countries in 2015. It also organized the second BRICS conference on disaster management in 2016. Disaster risk reduction is work in progress. Greater cooperation and capacity building, along with information and knowledge sharing, will go a long way in making Asia safer, stronger, and resilient.
In an interconnected and interdependent world, disasters are no longer local. The future of disaster resilience rests on your ability to work together across geographies and cultures. The Asian Ministerial Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction signals India's commitment to reach out across the Asia-Pacific region in the interest of a safer future.
He is spearheading India for disaster risk reduction preparedness, which comes from his wide experience in disaster risk reduction at both the policy as well as operation level, which he led after the 2001 earthquake in Gujarat. Ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed my proud privilege to invite our Honorable Prime Minister of India, Shri Narendra Modi, and I request him to kindly make his inaugural address.
Distinguished dignitaries on the dais, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you all to New Delhi for this landmark conference, the first after the adoption of Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. I commend the National Disaster Risk Management Agencies, the governments in the Asia-Pacific region, the United Nations, and other stakeholders for coming together for this important cause. Friends, 2015 was a momentous year. Apart from the Sendai framework, the international community adopted two other major frameworks to shape the future of humanity. The Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement on climate change. The spirit of interconnectedness highlighted in the film is the hallmark of these global frameworks. The success of each one of these depends on the success of the other two. Disaster risk reduction has pivotal role in supporting adaptation to climate change as well as sustainable development. It is in this context that this conference becomes timely and relevant. Friends, over the last 2 decades, the world and especially our region has undergone many changes. Most of them are positive. Many countries in our region have transformed their economies and become engine of global economic growth. Hundreds of millions of our people have been lifted out of poverty. The Asia-Pacific region has been a global leader in more ways than one. But we must not take this progress for granted. There are challenges as well. Over the last 20 years, more than 850,000 people died from disaster in the Asia Pacific. 7 of the top 10 countries in the world, in terms of number of deaths due to disasters, are in the Asia Pacific region. I've seen more for myself the human suffering caused by disasters. I witnessed the Gujarat earthquake of 2001, and later, as Chief Minister of the state, worked with my people to support post-earthquake recovery. It was distressing to see the suffering of the affected people. But I also inspired by their courage, ingenuity, and resolve to recover from the disaster. In my experience, the more we relied on people's own leadership, the better were the outcomes. This was not limited only to oven-driven reconstruction of houses, but also to construction of community buildings. For example, when we entrusted the community the task of reconstructing a school, the earthquake-resistant building was completed in time at a lesser cost, and savings were returned to government. We need to support such initiatives and leadership through policies and practices. Friends, we in Asia have learned from disasters. A quarter century ago, only a handful of Asian nations had national disaster management institutions. Today, over 30 Asian countries have dedicated institutions leading disaster risk management efforts. After the Indian Ocean tsunami of 2004, the 5 worst affected countries brought in new laws for disaster risk management. In a couple of days, we will observe the first International Tsunami Awareness Day. This would be an occasion to celebrate the huge improvements we have made in tsunami early warning. In December 2004, the Indian Ocean tsunami caught us unprepared, and there was no warning. We now have a fully functional Indian Ocean tsunami warning system. Along with its Australian and Indonesian counterparts, the Indian National Center for Oceans Information Services is mandated to issue regional tsunami bulletins. The same goes for improvements in cyclone early warning. India, if we compare the impact of cyclone events in 1999 and 2013, we can see the progress we have made. Similar progress has been made in many countries. For example, after the 1991 cyclone, the government of Bangladesh launched a large community-based cyclone preparedness program. It led to a significant reduction in loss of lives from cyclones. It is now recognized as a global best practice. Friends, This is just the beginning. There are daunting challenges ahead. The Asia Pacific is a rapidly urbanizing. Perhaps within a decade, more people in the region will live in cities than in villages. Urbanization will pose greater challenges for disaster risk management by concentrating people, property, and economic activity in smaller areas, many of them in disaster-prone locations. If we do not manage this growth in terms of both planning and education, the risk of economic and human losses from disasters will be higher than ever before. In this context, let me outline a 10-point agenda for renewing our efforts toward disaster risk reduction. First, all development sector must imbibe the principles of disaster risk management. This will ensure that all development projects, airports, roads, canals, hospitals, bridges, are built to appropriate standards and contribute to the resilience of communities they seek to serve. Over the next couple of decades, most of the new infrastructure in the world will come up in our region. We need to ensure that we build it to best available standards of disaster safety. This is a smart strategy which pays off in the long term. All our public expenditure must take into account risk considerations. In India, the Housing for All program and Smart Cities initiative represent such opportunities. India will work with other partner countries and stakeholders to build a coalition or center for promoting disaster-resilient infrastructure in the region. This will help generate new knowledge for hazard risk assessment, disaster resilient technologies, and mechanisms for integrating risk reduction in infrastructure financing. Second, work towards risk coverage for all, starting from poor households to small and medium enterprises to multinational corporations to nation states. Currently, in most countries of the region, penetration of insurance is limited to only middle and upper middle income groups. We need to think big and also think innovatively. States have an important role in not just regulating, but also encouraging coverage for those who need it the most. In India, we have taken bold steps to ensure financial inclusion and risk insurance for the poorest. The Jan Dhan Yojana has brought millions of people into the banking system. The Suraksha Bima Yojana provides risk insurance to millions who need it the most. We have launched the Fasal Bima Yojana, which will provide risk cover to millions of farmers. These are the basic building blocks of resilience at the household level. Third, encourage greater involvement and leadership of women in disaster risk management. Women are disproportionately affected by disasters. They also have unique strengths and insights. We must train a large number of women volunteers to support special needs of women affected by disasters. We need women engineers, masons, and building artisans supporting reconstruction, and women self-help groups assisting livelihood recovery. Fourth, investment in risk mapping globally for mapping risks related to hazards such as earthquakes. We have widely accepted standards and parameters. Based on these, in India, we have mapped seismic zones with 5 as the highest seismic risk and 2 at low risk. For disaster risk related to other hazards such as chemical hazards, forest fires, cyclones, different types of floods, we need to evolve similar globally accepted risk categories. This will help us ensure that we have a common understanding of the nature and severity of disaster risk in different parts of the world. Fifth, leverage technology to enhance the efficiency of our disaster risk management efforts. An e-platform that brings together organizations and individuals and helps them map and exchange expertise, technology and resource would go a long way in maximizing our collective impact. Six, develop a network of universities to work on disaster issues. After all, universities have social responsibilities too. Over the first 5 years of the Sendai framework, we should develop a global network of universities working together on problems of disaster risk management. As part of this network, different universities could specialize in multidisciplinary research on disaster issues most relevant to them. Universities located in coastal areas could specialize in managing risk from coastal hazards, and the ones located in the hill cities could focus on mountain hazards. The seventh, utilize the opportunities provided by social media and mobile technologies. Social media is transforming disaster response. It is helping response agencies in quickly organizing themselves and enabling citizens to connect more easily with authorities. In disaster after disaster, affected people are using social media to help each other. We must recognize the potential of social media and develop applications for all aspects of disaster risk management. Eighth, build on local capacity and initiative. The task of disaster risk management, particularly in rapidly growing economies, is so huge that formal institutions of the state can at best be instrumental in creating the enabling conditions. Specific actions have to be designed and implemented locally. Over the last 2 decades, most community-based efforts have been confined to disaster preparedness and contingency planning for the short term. We need to expand the scope of community-based efforts and support communities to identify local risk reduction measures and implement them. Such efforts reduce risks and create opportunities for local development. Sure that we make the most of traditional best practices and indigenous knowledge. Response agencies need to interact with their communities and make them familiar with the essential drills of disaster response. For example, if a local fire service visits one school in its area every week, it would sensitize thousands of children over a period of 1 year. Ninth, ensure that the opportunity to learn from a disaster is not wasted. After every disaster, there are papers and reports on lessons learned that are rarely applied. Often the same mistakes are repeated. We need a more vibrant and visual systems of learning. The United Nations could start an international competition of documentary film that record disaster events, their scale, and relief, rehabilitation, reconstruction, recovery effort. Afterwards, post-disaster recovery is an opportunity to not just build back better in terms of physical infrastructure, but also in terms of improved institutional systems for managing risk. For this, we need to put in place systems that can quickly provide risk assessments. India will work with partner countries and multilateral development agencies to establish a facility for technical support to post-disaster reconstruction of houses. And finally, bring about greater cohesion in international response to disasters. After the disaster responders pour in from all over the world. This collective strength and solidarity could be enhanced further if we work under a common umbrella. The United Nations could think of a common logo and branding under which all those who are helping with relief, rehabilitation, and reconstruction operate. Friends, armed forces protect nation states against external security threats. But to deal with disasters, we need to equip society with the right education. We have to wholeheartedly embrace the spirit of Sendai, which calls for an all-of-us society approach to disaster risk management. In India, we are committed to walk the talk on the implementation of Sendai framework. In June this year, India's National Disaster Management Plan was released which is aligned with the priorities set out in Sendai framework. In our effort to build disaster resilience, we stand shoulder to shoulder with all the nations of the region. Regional and international cooperation has an important role in providing an added push to our efforts. Last year in November, India organized the first ever South Asian Annual Disaster Management Exercise. In the spirit of regional cooperation, India will soon launch the South Asia satellite. The capabilities of this satellite and other space-based technologies can support the full disaster risk management cycle, risk assessment, risk mitigation, preparedness, response and recovery. India is ready to make its space capabilities available to any country for purpose of disaster risk management. As we implement the Sendai framework, we would welcome new opportunities for regional and international collaboration. I'm sure this conference will energize our effort, and the outcomes of the conference will provide a solid blueprint for collective action. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Prime Minister, for your inspirational address. You highlighted how past experiences can become learning experiences to face future challenges. You also shared the very relevant 10-point agenda for disaster risk reduction. Thank you indeed for your noteworthy suggestions. Ladies and gentlemen, may I now invite Shri Rajiv Mehrishi, Home Secretary, and request him to kindly propose a vote of thanks.
Honorable Prime Minister of India, Honorable Home Minister of India, all the dignitaries sitting on the dais, governors of the states, chief ministers of states, and ministers from participating countries, on all the delegates to this conference and all participants, on behalf of the Ministry of Home Affairs, it is my privilege to warmly and gratefully thank the Honorable Prime Minister of India, who gave us his valuable time and shared his wisdom born of personal experience with all of us, and who guided us in the Ministry of Home Affairs in the organization of this conference. Thank the Honorable Minister of India for his patience with and confidence in us, to which we hope we have lived up. To thank the Honorable Ministers of State, Ministry of Home Affairs, for sparing their valuable time for us, and especially to Mr. Kiran Rijiju, MOS, who is also the chairperson of our organizing committee. Thank my esteemed colleagues on the dais, the most honorable ministers who have led the delegations of their countries, governors and chief ministers of all the states of India, all country delegates, and all participants for joining in and enriching this conference with their presence. I must also thank all the organizers of this conference who have worked hard and relentlessly towards making this conference a success. They are too numerous to mention, but I think each one of them, whether from the ministry or the NDMA or the Delhi Police, our sister ministries, the local municipal bodies of Delhi, the Defense Exhibition Organization, the NDRF, the hotels, the caterers, the event manager,
I thank each and every member of this family of organizers. And lastly, I most thank the 40 children who are participating today in the painting competition, giving us many thought-provoking and insightful paintings that touch our hearts. I would request all participants to find some time in the next 3 days to visit the painting area competition to see these paintings. Indeed, it is these children, our children, and the future generations whose safety and protection and well-being should be the focus of all our disaster risk reduction efforts. Thank you, everyone. I have an announcement to make. As the Prime Minister and the dignitaries leave the stage, there shall be yet another short 6-minute film on disaster risk reduction, and thereafter there will be some administrative announcements made by the Master of Ceremonies. In the meanwhile, for these 6 minutes and the announcements, kindly remain seated. Dignitaries who are to join for the group photograph may, once the dignitaries on the stage leave, they may please proceed to the group photo space behind on the left here for the group photo, which the Prime Minister will also be joining. Thank you.
Beyond the river, cut off from the mainland, is a long winding green path leading to Patti Sonapur village. This village in Ganjam district is located between the river Rushikulya and the Bay of Bengal. With a population of 4,000 people, most of the residents of the village are fishermen. 30-year-old Kari Tata Rao has given his parents and 4 children a comfortable life through his grit and hard work. As his